Have you ever heard of Benjamin Kubelski? If not, you may have heard of him by his show business name, Jack Benny. He was one of the most famous comedians of the 20th century. In the most famous skit he ever did, a robber threatens him. "This is a stick-up, your money or your life." Benny is silent. "Look, bud, I said your money or your life." And Benny says, "I'm thinking it over." It's a classic moment in American humor. But now I realize Jack Benny was making fun of all of us. And it's not funny anymore because we choose money over life. Now let me tell you about the most important Jewish man who ever lived. Moses is about to die. He is standing before the people. He's about to climb the mountain towards his burial place. And at this moment, when he is about to die, he's between life and death. Here's what he says: "You have before you life and death, uvacharta b'chayim, choose life." I never got the power of these words before. Who would not choose life? The terrible answer that I've learned in the last year is America does not choose life. It chooses selfish freedom over life. It chooses what I want when I want it over other people's lives. It chooses money over life. America thought it over and allowed the robber to kill rather than give up money. I hear America talking. "Nobody can tell me what to do. This is a free country. I can do whatever I want." I respond, "But your state is at a peak of hospitalizations and deaths. It's the right time to reopen the state. It will be better for the economy." But people are dying every day by the thousands. "The virus is a hoax. It's fake news." 200,000 people have died. "The figures aren't real." Why don't you listen to the experts? What do they know? We know better. It's just like climate change. Conspiracies. And by the way, get rid of the Affordable Care Act. It's another conspiracy. But what about all those people trapped in nursing homes? Over 1/3 of the deaths are nursing home residents or workers. That's well over 60,000 human beings. It's acceptable losses. But what about all those promises to provide protective gear for health workers and to do testing? Well, if you don't test, you don't get sick. Stop testing. Well, there are these tight working places like meat packing plants that should be closed. Listen, I own a meat packing plant. I have to get that meat out the door. But the virus is spreading among the people at your plant. Well, they can come to work and get paid or not come to work and lose their jobs. It's entirely up to them. 40% of your workers have tested positive. So we're not going to test anymore. One of your workers died yesterday. Sorry, now go back to work. America did not choose life. It consciously did not choose life. There were states that reopened at their peaks of deaths and new cases. At the same time that the deaths were rising, fanatics with big guns were storming the state capitol in Michigan and screaming, "Liberate the state." And the president of the United States tweeted, "Liberate." And then he said that they're good people. Yeah, like those Nazis at Charlottesville, right? And that's when it hit me. It's all the same theme. Like a kid saying, "You're not the boss of me. I want my freedom. I want my AK-47. And I ask, well, why do you need a gun that can shoot 600 rounds a minute? Do you need that gun to shoot Bambi? Because it's my desire to have the best gun there is. You want to take my automatic weapon away from me, just try it. And I ask, well, if innocent little kids are mowed down in an elementary school, that's too bad. There have been 600 incidents of gunfire on school grounds in the last 6 years. The death tolls climb, and we don't act. There are some marches, and people say that they're going to keep trying, but they give up pretty quickly. And so we live our lives with the specter of gun violence because we want our guns, and we want big guns that can shoot a whole lot of people really fast. I don't care if you go to heaven as long as I got my AK-47 next to me in my car. America loves freedom more than life. Your money or your life, we'll take the money. Your personal freedom or somebody else's life, we want our freedom. Somehow, people on the right turn every discussion into a debate about liberty. You're trying to protect lives in Michigan? Liberate Michigan. As my friend Josh Weissman reminded me in The Wrath of Khan, 1982, Spock says, logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But America caters to the needs of the few who want their big guns that shoot 600 rounds a minute. I grant you that most gun owners are responsible and safety conscious and that they want what is best for everyone. But we cater to a small group of vocal people who emphasize their own select set of personal freedoms. All these different themes, opening up states and the economy and meatpacking plants and attacking the affordable health care, they all flow from choosing misguided, personal, selfish freedom. And it's amazing how all the debates are framed around freedom. Take abortion. Abortion is a very complex issue. I really see both sides of the debate. When you can see that little heart beating, that seems like life to me. That embryo has everything it needs to become a human being. I understand the complexity of the issue. Those who are anti-abortion made this incredible semantic move when they said that they are pro-life. They were saying that if you're for a person's right to choose, you are anti-life. Here's what I don't understand. These people who say that they should have the freedom to have an assault weapon and endanger other people by failing to conform to health standards and who want to be free tell other people what to do with their bodies. I don't understand that. How come so many of the so-called pro-lifers are so accepting of so many deaths to the virus, especially in the groups that are older or black or brown? That's not choosing life. That's not pro-life. That's choosing who will face death. If you are really pro-life, should you risk so many lives so that you can go to the bar or get your next tattoo? I may not be sure when life begins, but I'm sure it does not end because you're in a nursing home. What happened in the nursing homes in this country was heart-wrenching. It was heart-wrenching. I feel so awful for the families and the directors and the staffs who did everything they could with an astonishing lack of support from the federal government. I'm not sure how many weeks a fetus exists before its life, but life does not end because you live in an inner city. So if you're old or black or brown or you live in a blue state, you're expendable. How do those people sleep at night? After creating and aiding and abetting policies that led to the deaths of 200,000 people. If I were even partially responsible for the death of one person, I don't know how I'd live with myself. How do they sleep at night? The White House should be filled with guilty insomniacs. How does anybody sleep at the White House? Even ostriches don't really bury their heads in the ground. That's a myth. That's a misunderstanding. They couldn't breathe if they put their heads in the ground. Only irresponsible humans bury their heads in the ground while others are dying. Choosing life means caring about every life as a priority. We all wanted the economy to reopen. Nobody wanted people to be unemployed with all of the terrible consequences. Nobody wanted to be separated from their families. Nobody wanted kids to lose important times in their development. Every single one of us has suffered from this virus in one way or another, every single one of us. I don't minimize the terrible pressure of worrying about money. I don't minimize the hunger and the poverty. It's terrible. Right here in this area, the hunger and the poverty have been grueling. We've been running to the Hamden Food Bank with contributions all the time for the people around here who are hungry. But contracting the economy in order to save lives was exactly the right thing. And it should have been done for a lot longer. It should be done right now as far as I'm concerned. Reopening is very complicated and it has to be done very carefully. And I want to congratulate the state of Connecticut, starting with its leaders, for a serious and thoughtful approach to the pandemic and to the staged reopening. And I congratulate the people in our community who were responsible and careful not only for their own sake, but also for the sake of others. It's been rough, but I thank you. I thank each of you. Thank you for choosing life over money. You knew that going too fast would hurt others. It's also frustrating, and let's be honest, it's depressing, but it's very necessary. And just for the record, I cannot stand the phrase acceptable losses. I learned that phrase from movies like Dr. Strangelove about nuclear war. Well, if we only lose 20 million and we take the other guys out, those are acceptable losses. There are no acceptable losses. These months in crisis have made us think about what is really essential to us. As individuals and as a country, like Jack Benny with a gun pointed at him, we've been forced into thinking about what is really core to our lives. In the midst of all this horror and depression, we've had a chance to really think about things. If you only allow essential services, what exactly does that mean? What are essential things that a locality must provide for its people? Well, here's a quick list of what I think are essential services: healthcare, fire and police protection, clean water, sanitation, gas and electricity, the telephone system, radio, internet, transportation. And essential goods are medical supplies and gasoline. I seem to be in a minority of one because I don't think that liquor stores are essential. The debates I've had about this are interesting because people think that alcohol is absolutely essential to people's survival. I think about drunk driving, alcoholism, liver disease, domestic abuse, but I guess I'm missing something because everybody else understands. Non-essential services are things like tourism, entertainment, retail stores, barbershops, and beauty parlors. I'm really sorry about that last one. Corona hair was a big issue for a lot of people. But coloring your gray is not worth the risk of getting sick or making somebody else sick. This crisis has made us think about what we really need in our lives. This virus has created an existential crisis about who we are and what we really need and what our purpose is. So let me tell you a short story. It's not her real name, but Sophie calls, and she's close to hysterical. I don't want you to know who she is, so I'm going to make something up. She taught people how to work with each other by using outdoor activities. So groups from companies would come for a day and grow by doing these activities together. And her business had been destroyed overnight. With social distancing the norm, she couldn't do those outside activities. She was out of business, and she was understandably afraid. And she worried about her employees and her family and her future. And that's when she called and she said, "Rabbi, I'm going to be out of business in 30 days. I'm not going to make my rent. I'm not going to make my payroll or my loan payment." So I said, "Look, I don't know much about this, but you got to go virtual. You have to change the exercises you did outside to exercises that people can do by themselves inside. You have to get a Zoom account, and you have to figure out what technical things your client needs. And tell your clients that you're developing a new model on how you will run these activities." So Sophie had to understand that she was not really in the business of outdoor activities. Her core mission was building groups. She had to focus on what her core business really was. Now, instead of the word business, apply the word life. This crisis has made us think about who we are and what is essential about what we do. So let me use a direct example, how we have continued to have services in this synagogue and how we're having them right this minute. All these years, as a conservative rabbi, I was always against videos or photography on Shabbat. What we are doing right now was impossible to me. It was impossible for me to even think about. But what is this synagogue's essential service? Our core service is the service and prayer and community and togetherness. What was the alternative? The alternative was nothing. No prayer, no community, no communication, no Shabbat together. So I swallowed hard, and it was weird. I'd come here on Friday nights, and I'd turn on the lights and the computer and the extra cell phone, and I'd leave the service. And then I'd turn off the computer and the phone and the lights, and I'd leave. For a rabbi, it was like the Twilight Zone. But it was the best we could do. And little by little, we got better at it. I come and the computer wasn't working, and I call my daughter Sarah, and she said, you have to turn it on first, right? I said, but I can't find the Zoom. She said, it's that little blue button, right? Eventually we got better, and then we brought in David Margolis from Hollywood, and we rigged up a way to read the Torah in a way everyone could see. And during the week, we had services every morning and every evening. And there was this incredible bunch of people who came on every morning and every evening. We've had a minyan every morning and every evening. Before this all happened, there were lots of times we didn't have a minyan, right? During this, we haven't missed one. These incredible people who I will honor for the rest of their lives. I was always against a minyan like that. I was against a minyan that did not have 10 people in the same room. Now I was the only person in the room, and the others were all on the computer screen. But it allowed people to say the Mourner's Kaddish, and it allowed people to pray and talk and be together. At points, this was some of the only communication that we had all day. One woman said, these services are my anchors. They're the structure of my day. Another person said, when I saw the Torahs in the ark, I knew I could get through this whole thing. In April, a family came to me with a terrible problem. The grandfather had died of the virus in New York, and the cemetery had no idea when they'd be able to bury him, maybe a week and a half because of a terrible backlog, if you remember those days. And the grandmother, his wife, was very sick with the virus herself, and she said, I want to be at my husband's funeral before I die. Now, the problem was that you can't say the Mourner's Kaddish before the body's buried. But how could we let the wife die without being at her husband's funeral? So I stood here, and the family was on screens all over the country, and we did the funeral. And we said the Mourner's Kaddish before the body was buried. What was the alternative? Let the wife die without saying goodbye to her husband? All these things I did were controversial, and frankly, they were some of the hardest things I ever did as a rabbi. And I questioned myself, and other people questioned me at every turn. But every time I asked myself, what is our core purpose in this situation? Showing our love for those who've passed on. And so you can criticize me all you want, but what I was doing was the best that we could figure out to do. Essential services. What is essential? It's a mindful existentialist exercise, sort of like the high holidays, that ask us every year, what's important in my life? Who's important in my life? So let's use this crisis, and it's not over by a long shot. Let's use this crisis as an opportunity. On these high holidays, let's think about our society and our priorities. Does our society prize the selfish individual over the safety of others? It does. Does our society prize selfish freedom over the safety of others? It does. Let's also use this time to think about what we've learned about ourselves during this grueling period in our lives. Do we have the right priorities? And so if, God forbid, you have a gun stuck in your ribs and you hear someone say, your money or your life, don't do what America did in the last year. Don't hesitate for a second. Like Moses said, choose life.